Hi, everybody. This is Doug Reeves. I'm so honored and pleased that you could join us today for a really important discussion called Grading Reform, Immediate Implementation. And I got to tell you, the people who have written about grading reform for the last few decades, Bob Marzano, Tom Guskey, Rick Wormley, Ken O'Connor, they're all friends of mine. And I so admire and appreciate what they've done. So today is not about trying to sweep away the exceptional work that they have done, but rather to say, we've got the theory, we got the evidence, we got the research. How do we go from there to implementation? So what I want to try to do in the course of our discussion today is make sure that we can move from theory to implementation. And I'll give you some very practical ideas about how we can move from grading to implementation. And before I start, I should just say that on this very first slide, and by the way, all the slides will be available to you. They'll be emailed to you. It's always okay if you copy them, if you use them, if you share them. I'm not one of those cranky people who says you can't share slides. I really believe that research is there to be shared, and I'm really happy to share it with all of you. But if you don't take any other note in this conversation, take the note of my real telephone number, which I've just turned off, because every time I do this, somebody will call me and say, yeah, Doug, but it won't work with our electronic grading system. It won't work with our union contract. It won't work with our board policy, or whatever the barriers and impediments may be. Please make sure that you write down that phone number, or if you prefer to tweet at Douglas Reeves, prefer to email, you'll see my email there. And let's talk about that, because every time, bar none, I run into those implementation barriers, we can work through them. So today is about practical application. This is not the Stalinist 5-year plan. This is about practical application. So let's get to it. First of all, some learning protocols. We are blessed with a relatively small group today. So I want you to know that you could always unmute yourself, stop anytime, and provide a contrary idea. If you were in a graduate class of mine, I would assign half of you to say, Doug is crazy and wrong because, and the other half to say, well, maybe he's not so bad after all. Because adult learning thrives when there's a divergence of opinion. So please feel free to unmute yourself or to send a chat message in the chat room to say, what can we do to make this more clear? What can we do to make this better? Also, I'm going to request that you represent the people who are not in this room. And that includes parents, students, community members, board members, who may not necessarily buy in to the ideas that we're discussing today. So this is not about just my way or the highway. This is really about learning from you, and it will be a mutual learning experience. So I hope you'll consider sharing with me your views as well. Now, just a couple of quick notes about a research update. Man, the pandemic is real, and I'm not going to dwell on this a lot, but I'll just say the following. If you have schools in your system that have the same schedule, the same time allocation as they had in 2019, that is like the toddler who says, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. Come on. If kids are a year or two, depending on whose research you want to believe, behind in literacy and in math, they need more time. The number one complaint I'm hearing from teachers is that they just don't have the time to have kids catch up. And so you have to be able to grant them the time that they need. And one of the ways that we can respect teacher time is to reallocate minutes in the day, reallocate periods for secondary schools, and also reallocate the time that we use in staff meetings to give teachers the time to get real work done. It's so important. I cannot sufficiently express this. I've been all over the country during the pandemic and after, and we really have to give teachers the time that they need. We also have to make sure that the learning loss is real and it's not going to be affected by after school, by summer school. The most effective innovations are happening during the school day. And I know some of you are stuck in these master schedules. I just heard it yesterday. Master schedule doesn't allow me to do what I need to do. Pardon the French, but, mess up the master schedule. You've got to be able to give students what they need during the day not after school, not Saturday school, because they've got to be able to get the work done right then. And that may mean changing curriculum. That may mean changing master schedules. But I'll just respectfully challenge you with this. After kids have got accumulated several failures, we always have the time to redo the schedule, to redo a class, to remake a class, to do alternative scheduling. Don't wait until 2023. We can do it right now. Intervene immediately. You already know in the middle of September, when this broadcast is being originated, middle of September 2022, kids that are not reading on grade level, kids that cannot read not just the literature textbook, they can't read science or social studies. We need to give them intervention immediately and during the school day. So we've just got to be able to deal with that. Moreover, we're also dealing with staffing shortages. You've seen the research. 53% of teachers, according to the latest research, would find another job if they could. It's as high as 65% in some states. We've got to make sure that we give teachers what they need. And what they need, yeah, money is important. I will argue always for you to have money, but money isn't enough. We've learned this. There are people who got $10,000 bonuses. They got raises. They got all these things that people think buying us is going to be enough. It isn't. They need respect. They need time. They need safety. We've got to be able to give people what they need. So a couple of more research things, and that is, excuse me just a second, I've got to change this. The good news is that I've seen really great research findings. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer for you. I have seen, just as recently as yesterday, my God, amazing research that's happening inside out. I wish I could say that the best research was coming from me, but it isn't. The best research is coming from you. It's amazing teacher-based, classroom-based research. And I'm not talking about incremental gains. I'm talking about 80% reductions in the DF rate. I'm talking about dramatic improvements in chronic absenteeism, dramatic improvements in behavior, because that's what, when we do a few things we'll learn about today in improving grading practices, better behavior, better attendance, better academic achievement. And it's not coming from me, it's coming from you. It's coming from classroom educators and school leaders who are willing to identify and document what their best practices are. And I've seen this happen again and again and again. So let's address the matter at hand, remembering that you can all interrupt me at any time. It's okay to unmute yourself. It's okay to have controversial, contradictory findings. Colleagues, I just have to say to you, because I know that grading reform is controversial, it's okay to disagree about this. And that is why I want to make sure that if I accomplish nothing else, it's that you and I can disagree with each other and we'll still be friends. And what our students and our country, frankly, needs is to see people who can disagree with each other and still be friends. So let's talk about why grading reform is failing. First of all, we just don't have a sense of urgency. What I am talking about today is not a 2022 problem. This broadcast is being made in September of 2022. Colleagues, this is a 2062 problem. It is going to last for decades because the kids who do not succeed in our schools will have higher poverty, higher unemployment, higher use of our medical care system, higher use of our criminal justice system, and you and I will be the ones paying for this. So the next time you hear somebody saying, well, darn those kids, they deserve to fail, ask them, are they willing to spend the next 4 decades paying for their medical care, for their criminal justice involvement, for their poverty, for their unemployment, because that is what they will do if we continue to insist that grading as punishment works. Similarly, we got to take simple ideas. And my God, my friends who have written so much about grading reform, I love them, I respect them, but they're too darn complicated. I'm a simple guy. Just take a couple of things, like, can we agree on accuracy? Can we agree on fairness? Just a couple of things. If you will do those 2 things, accuracy and fairness, you will have a better grading system. You don't need a 20-page single-spaced grading policy. All you have to do is say, we value accuracy and fairness. And to our board members who may be listening, please, for the love of God, do not write a 20-page grading policy. Write a one-sentence grading policy that says, the superintendent shall establish a policy that is fair and accurate, period. And leave the rest to our classroom educators and to our teachers. They're the ones who have the expertise to do this. I've seen these policies of Byzantine complexity that do not work. So let's talk about what are the things that we can do. I'm going to ask you to stop listening to me and start talking. Use the chat room to tell me about the greatest fears about improved grading policy. What are the fears out there about grading reform? I'm going to wait for a minute, let you participate in the chat room, and tell me what you think the greatest fears about grading reform are. I'm going to start the chapter right now. Robin, thank you for that thoughtful comment. Kelly, thank you so much. Marie, you hit on the emotional issue behind grading. Thank you. Paula, thank you for getting the question behind the question. That was really thoughtful. Thank you. Let's have a couple more and then we'll go back to the presentation. So thank you, colleagues. Let's just synthesize what we've heard from our colleagues in the last couple of minutes. Policy alone isn't enough. You can adopt a policy, and I've seen it all over the country. It gets undermined at every minute. Moreover, what I really appreciate about what you said is that grading is an emotional issue. Here's what one teacher told me. She said, I used to be able to teach what I wanted, how I wanted, and assessed how I wanted. Well, along came standards, and they told me I couldn't teach what I wanted to teach. Now I have to teach according to the standards. Then along came teacher evaluation with No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and all the other things. Well, now you told me how to teach. So I can't teach what I want to teach. I can't teach how I want to teach. The only thing I've got left is grading. And Doug, now you're going to take that away from me? So I think we need to, right at the top, make sure that this is not adversarial with teachers. The theme you will hear throughout today is about respect. Cue Aretha Franklin. It's about a respect for teachers. And I think teachers gain more respect when they have the opportunity to actually not only use their own authority to assess students and stop giving up that respect to these dumb electronic grading systems that are challenging us everywhere we go. So, sorry, I need to get to the right slide here. So why is it so controversial? One of the things that I think we have lost is that we don't respect the concerns that parents and teachers and colleagues have. So here are some common objections that you and I might run into. Let me give you just a second to review those in the slide, and then I'll come back and join you. So let's come back to look at this slide. Students won't work hard because of grades. And colleagues, I just heard this yesterday. If I don't grade it, then they won't do it. And that makes perfectly intuitive sense for everybody on this webinar, including me, because we're public school educators. We all worked hard. We have university educations, and we became teachers. And can I just say, just God bless you for all being public school educators. But here's the respectful challenge I want to offer to you. What percentage of your students are going to become public school educators with a university degree? Because if it's south of 100%, we have to stop assuming that they're motivated the same way that we were motivated. Because we didn't want point deductions. We didn't want zeros. We didn't want Fs. We all avoided that. But today's grading policies assume that our students are motivated in the same way that we are. And that's simply a false assumption. Also, we want students to be prepared for college and life. Colleagues, I believe that, except our grading policies, like extra credit, like points, like averages, do not prepare them for college and life. I interviewed a bunch of college teachers as well as employers, and I said, what do we need to do in K-12 education to send our students to you with readiness and competence and confidence that they can enter your employment or enter your classroom in college or technical school or employment? You want to know the number one thing they said to me? They said, stop sending us these honor roll kids who never had to have feedback, never had to rewrite a lab report, never had to rewrite essays. Send us kids who can take feedback, because in college and on the job, they're going to get feedback. And when they get feedback, please rewrite this letter. Please redo this lab report. What they want to hear is, thanks, professor, thanks, manager, thanks, employer, for giving me that feedback. What they don't want to hear is, I've never had to rewrite anything in my whole life. I'm going to call my mom and my lawyer and my therapist. I'm not exaggerating, colleagues. That is what I'm hearing. Send us kids who can take feedback. One of the most valuable things that you and I can do as teachers is to give students feedback that is accurate and specific and timely. So what do we need right now? Give us feedback. Be able to collaborate. This idea that everybody has to just work alone and do things right the first time is simply not true. And one of the consistent findings that I've had in research over the years is give us students who have nonfiction writing, right to describe, right to persuade, right to evaluate, and self-advocacy. I just spoke to the parent of a middle school kid this morning. And one of the things that I think she said so wisely is that she had twin kids, and one was able to advocate for herself and the other was not. The one who can advocate for herself is going to have far better luck, not just in high school, but in college, on the job, because you can say, here is what I need to be more successful. That's one of the key skills, by the way, that you will never find in a state standard, but one of the most important things that we can do now. So let's talk about what you and I can do. I think teachers demand respect. Now, look, I'm all for more money for teachers. I know that there's money out there. I know that some people are paying signing bonuses, but that's not what I'm hearing from teachers. A $10,000 bonus does not replace respect, giving me the time that I need. Gee, nobody has time for prep classes. We all have to cover somebody else. They want time. They want the opportunity for collaboration, for professional learning. And if we deny respect, time, collaboration, and learning, we are going to lose the teachers that we've got right now. So here's how grading reform fits into all of this. First of all, there's two conversations that happen at the end of every marking period. Here's the disrespectful conversation. Gee, Ms. Jones, how many extra points do I need to get to move from a C to a B or from a B to an A? That's disrespectful. That's disrespectful to teachers and ultimately undermines students, because nobody in the world of college or work gets promoted with extra points. They get promoted with performance. And the message of today's webinar is performance, not points, is what matters. You want to increase respect for teachers? Stop using the average, stop using extra credit, start focusing on performance. The respectful conversation sounds like this. ma'am, sir, um, what do I need to learn and show and do in order to earn a B, in order to earn an A? And then we can talk about, oh gosh, so you had this great essay that had a claim, evidence, and reasoning. Good on you. That's a B. Oh, you'd like to earn an A. In that case, what you need to do is to show me that you can have a claim and a counterclaim, evidence and contrasting evidence, and then evaluate the difference in the credibility of those different sources, and then come to a conclusion. That's not more points. That's not more stuff. That is a difference in credibility, in evaluation, in thinking, in rigor, and complexity. That is what you and I need our teachers to do. Also, what our teachers need is time. You know, I'm a huge fan of Jennifer Gonzalez and the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. And just last week, she had this amazing podcast from an English teacher who used to spend hours every week at home grading essays. But now she has a newborn child and can't do that anymore. What she did was start doing work during class. And colleagues, I've seen the same thing in math, in English, in social studies. Get the work done during class. Homework is an illusion. It's a myth. We have to start getting it done during class. And when those teachers can do it, you and I can do it as well. Same thing with staff meetings, professional learning. Get the work done and give teachers the respect of the time that they need to get work done. It is primitive to read announcements to adults. So let's talk about creating conversation, as I say, without fears, without tears, rather, anger or fights. Let's start with common values. You know, if you call a meeting saying, let's talk about grading, people will show up with pitchforks. So don't do that. Let's say, let's talk about feedback. What can we all agree as adults, as students, that is important? And you will find universal agreement. Hey, feedback should be accurate. Feedback should be fair. And if that's good for us as adults, then it should also be true for students. Moreover, we can find common aspirations for students. We want kids to be responsible. We want kids to have learning. We want kids to be resilient, to be to have perseverance. We all agree on those things. So the whole idea is it's not just about grading, it's about feedback. So once we find that common ground, here are the sort of things that we can do. And I'm going to ask you once again to stop listening to me, go to the chat room, and tell me in your personal, in your professional experience, take some time in the chat room and tell me what are the characteristics of the very best feedback, the most constructive feedback that you've ever received. Go to the chat room and I'll see you back here in a minute. Thank you for these thoughtful comments. Thank you. Take about 15 more seconds, please. Oh, I could not have contrived this to turn out better. You have been so incredibly thoughtful about what you say effective feedback is. So my encouragement to you is do the exercise that you and I just did with your colleagues. Don't ask them about grading. Ask them about feedback. Because every time you ask them about feedback, they will replicate what you've just seen in the chat room. Because what they want to see is feedback that is accurate and fair. They want to see feedback that is specific. I love what you said about values and clarity and specificity. So colleagues, You already know what great feedback is. So here's the rub. If we know what great feedback is, and we know if that's good for us, it ought to be good for students, then why, after all the books, after all the articles on effective grading policies, do we still run into trouble? And here's the answer. We don't have buy-in from everybody. And I'll just tell you, stop the myth of buy-in. You don't need universal buy-in. What you need is effective teacher leadership. And just yesterday, I was with teacher leaders who proved this point because they are simply brilliant. You know, what I ask for is not buy-in. And let me illustrate with an example. One of the big things that we can do in improved grading practices, for example, is to get rid of the average. But Mr. Pham, who's a science teacher, was very skeptical. Mr. Pham was so skeptical that he actually, in his words, kept two sets of books. One was the old way and one was the new way. And what he was able to do was to say, you know, if Doug's way doesn't work, I'll still have the old way. But when he started keeping a new set of books, focusing on proficiency, the achievement of standards, not the average, and he had a dramatic decrease in the DF rate in his class, then and only then did Mr. Pham buy in. Mr. Dahl did the same thing. He's a math teacher, teaching 9th and 10th grade classes in a very high poverty school, very high level of failure rate. He didn't believe me either. But Mr. Dahl was willing to say, Doug, you may be crazy, but I'll give it a fair chance. And then Mr. Dahl saw an 80% decrease in the DF rate because he started not using the average and he started using in-class practice than homework, and then kids did better. And what I thought was brilliant for both Mr. Pham and Mr. Dahl was that they kept the same final exam because they were accused by their colleagues of grade inflation. Oh, gee, Mr. Pham, you're just giving away grades. Not really. Turns out that if they had the same or higher final exam grades, that was work inflation. The kids were working harder, not grade inflation. So don't ask for buy-in. I'm not offended at all if some people participating in the seminar say, Doug, you're crazy, I don't buy in. I'm not asking you for buy-in. I'm asking for a fair discussion, for a fair experiment. Try it for a semester. Keep two books as Mr. Pham did, and then you can decide if you have better, not just academic achievement, better behavior, better classroom climate, better engagement. Then you decide, but don't ask for buy-in up front or you will never make change. So how do we make sure that we can reduce fear and identifying what will not change? One of the big problems in American education is that we jump into these things and we tell people, you know, there's a new sheriff in town, I'm going to do these things, and people hate change. So rule number one is talk about what does not change. For example, if you love ABCDF grading, just keep ABCDF grading. It's a dumb fight to say, oh no, 43210 is better than ABCDF. If your community culture likes ABCDF, keep it. Don't argue about the non-essentials. We'll still have transcripts and GPAs. Hey, my kid needs to go to college. My kid needs to apply for a scholarship. Fine, keep that. Still have academic honors. You want to have valedictorian, salutatorian, good on you. I would just ask you make it fair and accurate, because I'll tell you what's not accurate is saying that the 3.99995 is different from 3.99994. That's dumb. That's a distinction without a difference. So what I would ask you to do is to say, if you have this threshold of, let's say 4.0 or higher, with maybe with your values, maybe with service, with leadership, with organization, whatever you say are your values, if you hit that threshold, you're a valedictorian. Maybe some years nobody will meet it. Maybe some years 5 kids will meet it, but stop the dumb 1/10,000th of one decimal point difference. And we'll still make sure that we have consequences for kids who don't do it. I worry a lot that sometimes our critics will say, well, Doug, if you stop grading homework, if you don't use the average, then you're just suborning bad behavior. You know what? I believe in consequences. I think adolescents need consequences. let's just make sure we get the consequences right. And I'm telling you that if zeros and Fs and point deductions worked, we've been trying that in American education for about 400 years. And if that worked, you'd think that by 2022, students would be so afraid. Oh my goodness, if my work is not perfect and on time, I'll have consequences because I'll get an F or a zero or a point deduction. All the work today should be on time and perfect. Colleagues, do you know any teacher who believes that? I haven't met them yet. So let's talk about the essential element of feedback. I want to make sure that we keep on time, but this is really important. If you want to have a big takeaway from today, it's FAST, F-A-S-T, which stands for fair, accurate, specific, and timely. And if you want to have one thing that we need as educators and that our students need as students, it's feedback that is fair, accurate, specific, and timely. So fairness is all about consistency. Now, my Red Sox are in the last place right now. Our new motto, by the way, in Boston is "Thank God for Baltimore." We may have found one team that we can beat. But all I will tell you is, as much as we complain about officiating, what we expect when we watch the Sox lose again is that at least the officiants are fair. They're consistent. And that's why they have multiple people on the field to call the game. Is it fair? Is it foul? Is it a home run or an inside the park? We expect fairness and consistency. And you want to know what? A lot of grades don't meet that standard. We expect a higher degree of fairness from the Red Sox, even when we lose, than we do of classroom educators. Fairness is all about consistency. So I'm not going to ask you to do this in the chat room, but I'm going to proudly share with you an experiment that I did that was so completely wrong. By the way, subtext here is evaluate researchers, not when they always claim to be right, but when we admit we are wrong, because I was so wrong about this. So I did this experiment, right? I said, hey, what's the difference between A kids and F kids? And all these hypotheses came out. Well, it's parent support, it's prior knowledge, it's raw intelligence. So I wrote all those down. It's attendance, it's behavior. And then what I did was to create a common profile for a student. Same parents, same behavior, same attendance, same raw intelligence, same quizzes, same finals, same homework, same everything. And if my hypotheses were right, then that same profile should have had the same grade. But as you can see in this chart, I was once again totally wrong, because what the evidence said from more than 10,000 teachers and administrators was the same kid could have had an A or a B or a C or a D or an F. It was all over the map. And what I learned from that is that the difference between the A kid and the F kid was not what my hypotheses were. The differences were the idiosyncratic grading practices of the teachers. And by the way, I know some of you are very calibrated. I'm sure some of you have got common grading practices. I did this in Singapore at the International Baccalaureate Heads Practices. And they said, oh, Doug, don't do that experiment here because we're internationally calibrated. I did it anyway, and I got the very same results that you see in front of you. It could have been an A, B, C, D, or F. So we really have to define that this is not fair, because if the same kid, imagine your triplets go to your high school and they all had the same teacher parent, they all have the same nutrition, they all have the same homework, they did everything the same, and one brought home an A or a C or an F, you would cross-examine your kids, as I do mine. How in the world did you get that grade? And they'd say, I don't know, or the teacher didn't like me. We got to do better than this. This is the very definition of unfairness. So I will just tell you, one of the things you don't have to do is to claim, oh, gee, our old grading system is the way we've always done it. No, you don't. You can go back to traditional A, B, C, D, F grading. A is a 4, B is a 3, C is a 2, D is a 1, F is a 0. That's it. The idea that we've always had this dumb 100-point scale is simply not true. And it's also fundamentally inaccurate, because everybody listening on this call right now, I trust you completely. I trust you with my own kids to tell me the difference between an A and a B, and a B and a C and a D. But you want to know what nobody on this call can do? Is tell me the difference between a 32 and a 33, or a 69 and a 70, or let's face it, where all the blood is spilled at the end of every semester, an 89 and a 90. Nobody can do that. That is a distinction without a difference. And we've got to be able to say the broader the categories, A, B, C, D, F, are far more likely to be accurate than the minute categories of 90, 89, 87, and so on. So let's talk about accuracy. That was about fairness. Here's another opportunity for me to confess all my faults. 2/3 of my kids were not English speakers. So I was teaching math. So you could tell from my tie today. Was I really teaching math, or was I teaching English? Was I really assessing math, or was I assessing English? What I've seen around the United States and around the international community today is that a lot of what we call math education is English language literacy with numbers in it. Same with homework. We grade students down because they lack character, they lack personal responsibility, or maybe they go home to sibling care, to a job, to a number of other family requirements that have nothing to do with homework, and yet they grade her down as a result of that. So fairness, accuracy, the S is specificity. What do we need to do right now? We have to stop with a generic, nice job, whether it's for students, for teachers, and in fact, give people absolutely clear and specific guidance. You know, if I'm ever lucky enough to be in one of your classrooms, I'm never going to do a smiley face, nice job. What I'll always do is say, hey, there were 35 kids in the class. I saw 25 that were absolutely on task, paying attention. I saw 10 that had heads in the desk. If I come back next time, I really want to see 35 out of 35. Or when I was with you, I saw one child raising her hand all the time, answering every question. Next time I come back, I want to see equity sticks where every student has an equal opportunity to be involved. And so we've got to make sure that we are clear and specific. Grades need to be specific as well, not just points, but A, B, C, D, F. You're advanced, you're proficient, you're approaching proficiency, you're not satisfactory, or you're simply not trying. That's the F. So to be really clear, I want to tell you what I think an A means in my book. If a B means that you write a persuasive essay with clear and good evidence and all the citations, that's good. You earned a B. But if you want to get an A in my class, write a persuasive essay that has a claim and a counterclaim, arguments and counter arguments, evidence and contrasting evidence, and then evaluate which evidence is more persuasive than the others. That's not more pages. That's not more stuff. That's greater credibility in the greater work. So fast, remember, fair, accurate, specific. The T is timely. Absolutely give a pledge to teachers. If you observe a class, give them same day face-to-face feedback. Stop these dumb electronic messages, because I've seen teachers look at the very same message and interpret it in two different ways, face-to-face. And I'll tell you what my colleague Rachel George does, is that she says, hey, before I tell you what I saw, you tell me what you saw. And she wrote this brilliant article that talked about how when teachers have the opportunity to tell their version of the story first, before the observer starts, you have much better collaboration between teachers and administrators. So I'm just going to end with this, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity for pushback and challenge. If you could just do two things to dramatically reduce the DF rate and improve accuracy, do these two things. Number one, go back to the old-fashioned ABCDF scale, and A is a 4, B is a 3, C is a 2, D is a 1, F is a 0. That will stop all the dumb fights over the minimum 50, just simple ABCDF. And finally, grade students on performance. Stop the dumb calculation of attendance and homework and all those other things. The only thing that matters is how they perform against your state standards. And I will tell you, that is the way that we grade pilots, drivers, brain surgeons, they make a ton of mistakes. We don't judge them on the mistakes that they made 3 months ago. We grade them on their proficiency. So if you want to take away two big ideas, just those two things, simple A, B, C, D, F, don't worry about numbers, and grading on proficiency, not the average. Those two things, you will see, colleagues, in one semester that will hopefully improve your performance and reduce your DF rate. So we've got about 5 more minutes left. I want to open the floor to you. It's okay to unmute yourself. And remember, colleagues, this is a safe place for disagreement. If you disagree and you think I'm crazy, it's okay to say that. I promise that we'll have a mutually respectful conversation. But if you've got questions, or maybe even, I'll bet we have people on this call with success stories. If you're willing to share a success story, please do that. So the floor is yours. And you can use the raise hand function, or you can just unmute yourself and chime in. Oh my God, I see we got the godfather of grading reform, Professor Tom Guskey, on the room. So now I am completely intimidated. Professor Guskey, I will just add, literally, in the last 2 days, I was in the acknowledgement that a book that I was writing, you were the first line of the acknowledgement of the books. Because if you want to find somebody who is the godfather of this subject, it's Tom Guskey. And the other thing, Tom, that I was mentioning about you is that somebody was telling me that mastery learning is with breathless enthusiasm, this new 21st century idea. I said, Tom was advised by Benjamin Broom, who in the 1960s did mastery learning. So it's not exactly a new idea. So Tom, I'm deeply honored that you were willing to join us today. So Robin, I see that you've chimed in. Please unmute yourself and share your ideas.
Hi, thanks for giving me a minute here. I work for St. Paul Public Schools, and so we have 9 large high schools and a smattering of smaller schools as well, specific. And I am a teacher on special assignment, and we have decided to undergo grading reform. And my question is specific, is timeline wise. We kind of got this information last December-ish that we were doing this, and we have a lot of teachers kind of freaking out that it's going to be something big and it's going to be, kind of top down. And my goal is to do this more bottom up with educator input and like the action research. Do you think in, like, let's say this time next year, so that would be 1 year, that with, we're talking about 500 secondary teachers, would it be reasonable to try to do it in across the board, maybe only the things that you talked about, or would like a more a rollout, maybe just the core subjects or something like that? Do you have any input on that?
Robin, I really do, and I really appreciate this because this is good for everybody. I loved what you said about bottom-up change. My best successes in grading reform are not when the board spends 5 years, studying and then identifying a policy, because people will undermine policies every day. The bottom-up change that you identified is exactly what's worked. And literally yesterday, I was in a district where there was teacher leadership. They created what we call the science fair for adults, where they said, here's my challenge: too many kids flunking 9th grade algebra. What was my intervention? Well, they moved practice from home to the classroom. They stopped using the average. They started using, mini assessments at the end of each unit. What was my result? Not only dramatic decrease in the DF rate, but better climate, culture, discipline, all those things that teacher responded to. And people, honestly, who would not believe me, but would believe the teacher in room 103, that bottom-up change is what really propelled the district into higher levels. And I would just add one thing more, Robin. This is why I think I really value that kind of field research. because I would get deep into the weeds of this, but man, you let the teachers speak, and when the teachers speak, they'll say, Doug, it wasn't just about the DF rate, it was about climate and discipline. For example, a principal I just met with yesterday added 3 new electives because she eliminated 3 sections of repeaters. That's what gets the faculty on board, is what's in it for them. And I think we have to make it legitimate to talk about what's in it for the faculty: safety and discipline and more electives because we eliminated sections of repeaters. So I've written about this extensively, but honestly, that's the bottom line. And Robin, I really want to endorse your bottom-up approach. And by the way, I'm co-authoring an article right now with the union president in that district, because I think she is also a real leader in saying we all have common ground here. Obviously, we're a hierarchical system. Unions disagree with leaders. I know you've been through that in St. Paul right now in another profession, but when we can get the union and the administration to find common ground, it really works. Thanks, Robin. Who else would like to chime in? And please either unmute yourself or use that raise hand function. If I had my equity sticks at hand, I would be calling on you.
So, thank you. Question on retesting. I'm a math supervisor, a 25-year math teacher. So I appreciate some of your examples that are referencing math. We are going through grading reform, and we're not as wide as A, B, C, D, F yet in our broader categories, but we do struggle with like retesting policies. And it was a bad day when the teacher offered the test. There's a lot of reasons, and this revisiting of work. Suggestions there for me and my leading a department through this.
Yes, sir. Well, so math teacher to math teacher, let me first of all thank you for your service, because it's not an easy position to be in. Let me tell you what I've seen happening around the country right now. The retake is a real burden on teachers whose number one complaint is time. So one thing that I've seen is mini assessments. You don't retake the whole unit. Hey, you had problems with the Pythagorean theorem. You had a problem with quadratics. Here are 3 items. Do these right now. I'm going to grade them right now in class. And if you mess up, I'm going to give you feedback right now. I expect to have my feedback respected right now. And do that. So not 40 items, literally 2 or 3 items. So mini retakes, I think, is one thing that respects teachers' time and gives students what they need in terms of immediate feedback. The second thing that I've seen is pre-planning alternative assessments. And that is, we've all heard the complaints about test anxiety. We've all heard the complaints about, I'm just not a good test taker. Fine. What I saw, and this is outside of math, but a social studies teacher that I thought was brilliant, did her responsibility was everybody gets 1 retake. Okay, dogs eat homework, grandmothers pass away 7 times, that's it. But after 1 retake, here's 4 alternative assessments. And she made them very rigorous, like design a board game that shows mastery of the curriculum, read authentic newspaper editorials from the period we studied, explain the author's point of view, look at 2 maps before and after. In other words, so sometimes alternative assessments get a bad rap because they're less rigorous. She completely overwhelmed that by saying these are more rigorous than my unit test would have been. But I'm not going to hear any complaints about test anxiety. Choose something else from the menu. So I really respect teachers who are angry about the paperwork drill, the back and forth, a ping pong match. So I loved what she did. 1 retake. After that, you go to the menu. So I don't know if that's helpful for you, but let me stop there and see if that's useful.
Yeah, it is. It is. And if I could ask also, who's eligible for the retake? So like, is it the
Ah,
student, like in terms of an equity issue? And, I would just say that I would be wanting something that intentionally focuses the learner on the learning as opposed to the grade itself. So, if a student gets a B in an honors pre-calc class, does that student have access to a test again to achieve an A?
so,
Yeah,
so yet another opportunity for me to confess where I've been so wrong in my hypotheses, because my focus had been on underachieving students, getting from failure to a C, from a D to a C, and so on. But sir, exactly as you suggest, some of the greatest appetite for that were kids who wanted to go from a B to an A. And here's the little research footnote that I thought was really interesting. I mentioned Mr. Fromm earlier. One of the things that he noticed when he did grading reform is that there were dramatically fewer D's and F's, but there were also fewer A's. Because what Mr. Fromm did was to say, hey, an A in my class is going to really mean something. An A is greater in rigor and complexity. And so kids had to work for it. And there were some kids who said, okay, if that's what an A means, go for it. And there were others who said, well, that's a lot of work. and they didn't. And I think the context is so important because the allegation on grading reform is that it lowers standards. And what I thought Mr. Fromm did so brilliantly was to say, if you're going to get an A in my class, it really is rigor and complexity, and it's going to prepare you for college. So even while he was having fewer D's and F's, he really set the bar high for A's. So I just think that also gives you candidly a political defense in front of the board, in front of colleagues, in front of parents who were worried that this is just dumbing things down. That was not my experience or Mr. Fromm's experience as well.
and then lastly, are there resources or lighthouse districts that you could point me towards just to tap into this and continue our journey?
I would, and I don't know anything about the demographics of your system, but let me just mention one person in particular, Mr. Dahl. Michael Dahl is his name. He has done presentations throughout California with great credibility. If you email me, I will send you Mr. Dahl's contact information. But he serves very high poverty schools, and I've been in his classroom and watched exactly what he does, and he's really had an impact not only in his classroom but because of his credibility as a 20-year plus teacher with union veteran, all that kind of experience. People believe Mr. Dahl when they would probably not believe an outsider like me. So I really recommend him to your consideration.
Great. And lastly, I just want to thank you. I jumped on the Zoom expecting hundreds on it. So to have your expertise in such a small Zoom session has really been awesome. So thank you very much.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. Well, colleagues, we've just expanded our time. I just want to say one more thing. If you got the PowerPoint, you saw my email. I'm not saying I got all the answers. I'm just like the guy on TV who says I've seen a thing or two. And I want you to make sure that you can always email, call me. And if I can offer some research or some examples of what I've seen around the country and around the world, I'm always happy to share that. So please consider that. In the meantime, I hope to see you again. We do these webinars all the time. And if I didn't say it before, I want to say it again. It's always okay to distribute, to copy, to use the research that you see on the handouts. Same is true at creativeleadership.net, where you'll find free videos, research, and tools. I hope you'll take advantage of those. So thanks, everybody. And Professor Gusky, my goodness, I'm like doing a banjo routine in front of the Rolling Stones. So I've got the most famous grade researcher on the planet in this audience. So thanks, Tom, for being here. So everybody have a great day. See ya.